everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the Bao Podcast. Today I'm here with Arne Allewaert. Arne is the co-founder of AMAVI Capital. AMAVI is an independent pan-European investor established to support the growth of the leading and most promising companies active in the European Proptech industry. AMAVI bridges the gap between the traditional real estate industry on the one hand and the most groundbreaking Proptech scale-ups on the other. I'm very curious about Arne's story today because the last couple of months we have only been hearing positive things about the progress of AMAVI. So we are very curious to hear the beginning and how it's going with the fund. So without further ado, Arne, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I already said it in the introduction, but we are hearing a lot of positive news recently about AMAVI. But before we dive into the current way of how it's going, we would first like to go a bit more back into time and to hear where the idea of AMAVI came from and how it was started. So if you could explain in a couple of sentences how you came up with the vision for the fund, that would be great.
Yes, of course. Well, thanks for having me, Benjamin, by the way. Proptech, yes, I have a real estate background, as you know, maybe a little background on that. I started about 10 years ago with a property developer, Ion, well known in Belgium. We were one of the fastest growing companies in Belgium in property development, mainly by embracing change, embracing technology, embracing new business ideas, new business models, which is very unique in this very conservative sector as real estate. There, we grew to one of the largest property developers in Belgium, at least top 5, for sure one of the fastest growing companies. And at that stage, we had a very good sight on the upcoming tech trends. We saw the tech trend coming up, especially in the US, about 7 years ago. And we saw it very slowly also entering in the European property sector. But we wanted to invest in that trend and drive that acceleration, that adoption of technology further. But we immediately saw that we did not want to do this with one company alone, because you cannot have an impact with just one company, and you create an interdependency between a larger corporate and some growing or growth companies. So that's how the idea of AMAVI came up. We wanted to set up a very independent investment vehicle, very important, drive consolidation, drive that PropTech trend throughout Europe, but with not just one company, but with a fund funded by several corporates active in construction and real estate. And that to us is the only way of really having an impact in that sector, is making the bridge between the old school real estate and construction on the one hand, and that growing PropTech sector on the other. And that's exactly what AMAVI does. That's our vision, that's our goal.
Okay, that's a big goal.
For sure.
How did you start with something like that? Because it sounds great, and I think it's a very noble cause. Because I think it's very necessary that something like AMAVI was founded in Europe. I mean, you have other funds, but true. In Belgium, for example, I think you guys were the first, if I'm correct.
Yeah, first in the Benelux, indeed.
Yeah. So I can speak from experience that I think it's a very positive undertaking. But yeah, can you take us a little bit into like how do you start from that big vision into starting something like AMAVI?
Yeah, of course. Well, what are the basics of our team at AMAVI? And this is very important. We saw that there is a need for bridging that gap, one, but also a need for consolidation into the PropTech market. Because we see, also compared to the US, we see a very fragmented PropTech market up to today. So we see solutions in a country like Belgium, a similar solution in a country like the Netherlands or Germany, but the issue or the problem is global. And still, those companies tend to focus on the local market only today. And what we see since about a year and a half, more and more PropTech companies start to become a platform and start to have cross-border activities and tend to have a more holistic approach than just this very small problem to solve within the whole value chain. And that's an interesting proposition. And exactly that is the trend we want to drive in PropTech is that consolidation. And that's the background of our team as well. So at AMAVI, we're a founding team of 6 people with 3 very different backgrounds. As I mentioned, real estate is myself and the 2 founders of Ion, the development company. Then on the technology side, we have Jonas Danens, which is the founder of Team Blue, founder and CEO of Team Blue, probably well known in Belgium. It's one of the fastest growing tech companies, one of the first unicorns in Belgium, now one of the largest web hosting companies in Europe. And he also saw that fragmented market in web hosting, the early 2000s. There was a huge need for web hosting services, but again, a very fragmented market. So what he did, he started in his bedroom. It's quite a Silicon Valley story. Yeah. And he saw this fragmented market immediately and grew through a very strong buy and build strategy. So buying his smaller competitors throughout Europe, I think he did over 50 M&A deals in just 1 year's time. And now he's one of the largest companies in Europe in web hosting. And that's the analogy we want to do in PropTech as well, is consolidating that trend. So that's the second angle. And the third angle is the private equity angle. We also have that within our team. That's in the person of Paul Thiers, which is also well known in the private equity, but especially also Frederik van de Wegen. He has a background with Waterland, one of the largest private equity funds in Europe. And again, investing in fragmented markets, driving consolidation. So that's not a coincidence. We see that as a huge opportunity within PropTech. And that's most of the time that's an angle from which VCs don't look at the sector or at PropTech in general. So most of the time they look for organic growth, but we want to really drive that through M&A as well. And of course, M&A is not always applicable to every subset of PropTech, but that's an interesting growth path we want to explore as well.
Okay, maybe for our listeners, a unicorn, that's a startup valued at above
1 billion.
So 1,000 million, right? Am I saying this correctly?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Okay, 1 billion. Okay. So it's really the idea of can you like combining or countering the niches that are starting to happen in different elements of the market. Yeah. So can you give an example?
Yes, for sure. And that's one of the main advantages we have since we come from real estate. Of course, we know the pain points quite well, and we've identified some interesting pain points we focus on as a PropTech fund. And if you look at the value chain, because that's our definition of PropTech, we look at the whole value chain of the built world. So it's not just focused on, let's say, property developers or asset managers. It's really everyone who has some kind of role in this whole value chain has a profit to be gained from PropTech. So what we first of all see is a lack of data insights. And we say this often, but real estate is a gut feeling sector. We take very large decisions, and I know you know, very large decisions based on gut feeling and not based on data. So this is, of course, something that can be changed because there is a lot of data out there. But there's actually too much data. Data should be aggregated before you see the interesting patterns into that data. But that's a very interesting vertical we're now looking at. And of course, the second one is everything around construction tech. Very interesting space. And I think that's also the one Bao Living is active in.
True.
What is the main issue in the context space? And again, this is nothing new for you, but we see a huge carbon footprint of that industry. Obviously, 40% of carbon emissions, etc. You know the figures. But also, and that's tied to each other, of course, a huge inefficiency into that sector. So within contact, we look for solutions on the one hand that we call the moonshot ideas that can really disrupt the sector as a whole, medium term, but combined with the quick wins into that sector as well, because there are a lot of quick wins let's be honest, on the building site, data gathering, getting more safety on the building site, just more small efficiency increases. They are really, really out there to be had. Third focus.
Maybe quick interruption. Last week, maybe a quick fun story. To also give an example of what you were saying about the waste. Last week, I was having a conversation with a big manufacturing producer party in Flanders, and he was explaining to me. I never heard this before. This specific example that he has experienced on multiple occasions already. That he needs to deliver for a really big project. 50 kitchens, and they deliver them, and the windows are not yet in the building. So it's still, water is still, if it rains, water still comes in, wind comes in. And he arrives with his product on site, and the owner the builder, the contractor just told him, install the kitchens, because otherwise we don't get the next payment.
Good idea.
Yeah. And he was like, but they're going to be destroyed in like 2 days because it's going to rain tomorrow. And he's like, no, it's fine. Just install them. We will order them again next week. We will deliver them officially at the end of today, but then we can get our next payment, and then it's fine, because we calculated in, 5 to 10% error margin. And then,
Crazy.
it's so, and then he installed them, and then a week later he drives by them and everything is laying it's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
I'm not surprised by it, but it's mind blowing. If you think of the general construction process, it's all about building something manually, tearing it down again to do your finishing. Before you want to put your techniques in the wall, you have to cut the wall again. So it doesn't make any sense the way we build right now. But I think we really need to go for the parallel approach, in the sense that it's very hard to disrupt that sector tomorrow. We have to try, of course, but we have to look for the quick wins as well to get the sector going.
Definitely.
For sure.
Definitely.
So that's two. The third focus we have is everything around customer experience. We also say this again, when you order something to eat, something very ordinary like a pizza, you have more customer experience than just ordering an apartment. And that's something that needs to change, because we see this huge demographic shift that a lot of younger people are now getting into that real estate market, and they are flabbergasted that they don't have any experience at all, which they have in every other sector, by the way, but not in the real estate sector. That's crazy. So more and more real estate companies see that they need to get onto that digital wave. And of course, PropTech is one way to drive that again. And what we also see is then, and that's more the general part, I said that carbon footprint reduction into construction tech is very important, but actually it's a general trend throughout all these silos that we need to build, manage, use, design a building in a more sustainable way. And that's one of the key drivers we see in PropTech right now, is that sustainability trend. It's asked from the users, especially the largest, let's say, investors in real estate up today, but also being top-down pushed by governments. You see the EU Green Deal translated into local legislation now. So that's a key driver, especially in the European PropTech market that we see today.
Are there any, because you mentioned you try to aim for the low-hanging fruit to start with. Are there any like quick wins or like low-hanging fruit that you see on the environmental aspect of construction?
That's a good question. I think the low-hanging fruit that also indirectly impacts sustainability is just efficiency increase. And there are a lot of potential efficiency increases on a regular building site without disrupting it. That's one. But of course, the disruption I believe the most in, it might be not a quick win, but this is just about standardization on the building site. This is just the main issue we have on the construction site, that every architect starts with a blank page, always with a blank page for every project, every building, and we need standardization. So we need building blocks to build with. We need to improve that process over and over again. If we make it more of an industrial process, we can learn from every iteration, and that way we can make it better. Now it's just always making the same errors again and again and again, and we never learn from it. And that's actually one issue that we see not only in construction, but throughout all the verticals, since the whole value chain is chopped up in silos. So everybody lives in his own silo, has its own interests, and he protects its own interests. And that's an issue. So we need to get out of those silos and think through the whole value chain. You see that happening right now. You see developers getting out of that silo and now also being involved in the management of a property. And if you think of the management of a property when designing the property, that's a whole other mindset. And that is what we need, actually.
That's the design and build model.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what do you make then? I mean, we could see it coming from a couple of months away, but what do you make from the Catera failure now? Because if there's one example that I always used to put in my presentation as well, of like a really ambitious project of trying to work between those different verticals and to really, challenge it like an American technology company would do, and then after what is it, 4 years?
Yeah.
All the money you need in the world, and then such a brutal failure.
True. let's not generalize it. I think just as the WeWork story showed us that there were some, let's say, mistakes that have been made. This is not the general trend, of course, for prefab construction, let's be honest, because there's a lot of potential in that. On the other hand, I think trying to solve real life issues in construction with technology money and a whole bunch of technology money is not the right approach. That I'm quite convinced of. It also shows the downside and the risks of a fully vertically integrated company. It has potential to control all the processes. On the other hand, it's a very dangerous model, because in this world we need to be lean, agile, and mean to really find your way into that business.
Yeah. Personally, I find it very interesting, because you see, we live in a time where you see that in a completely different sector, the automobile. There is this one company that's been doing it incredibly successfully, Tesla, completely trying to do as much as possible vertically. And then I personally, I was also thinking, the Catera model, very risky, of course, because it's like getting it's like throwing gasoline on a fire, and if something is not controlled, it just explodes, which maybe I think could have happened there. But it's interesting, because you see it working so beautifully in a completely different sector, and then you see it completely exploding in the sector of ours. Yeah,
true. But Tesla also haven't made a lot of money with selling cars, though.
No.
That's something that will happen, quite sure of that. It will be a successful company, but for now, they didn't realize to do so.
No, it's true.
So still something to be proven in the future.
Mm-hmm. So how do you look at, like, what are really interesting models then? If it's not, because you were talking about we need to be careful about not continuing to siloing all the knowledge. We need to be able to flow between them, but you cannot own them. It doesn't seem that's the way to go either.
It's a thin line, I know. But for instance, just to give an example, we invested into a Dutch company, Finch Buildings. I think you know the company. Yeah. What they did is they've built a platform for modular construction in CLT. So that's a good starting point. You have a good building material. It's a healthy, sustainable one. And it's modular in the sense that you can build buildings and you can disassemble the buildings again. But they don't own the production model themselves. So what they do, they own the platform, and they outsource the production to a third party. Mm-hmm. That makes it, let's say, or allows that you focus on what you do best. And again, it makes it the model scalable as well, which is, of course, as an investor, very important to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, when you are explaining it, that's also the way that we try to tackle it. And again, going back to the Catera example, when I'm contemplating how that we came up with that model, it's not that we started 5 years ago and we're thinking, oh, this is the best model. I mean, it's also somewhat, but it's just resource constraints. We had very little resources. We still have very limited resources, and then you tend to go to that kind of model.
That's the only right approach, I believe in.
In scaling organizations. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it's going to evolve in the next couple of years.
That's for sure. A lot of people talk about this prefab construction right now. And prefab is not new in itself. We've seen a lot of prefab companies in the past, but it's using other building materials. It's really controlling that process 100% in a factory and then assembling that on the building site. Again, with that CLT, for instance, that's something that we haven't seen before. There's a concrete prefab building you cannot disassemble.
No,
there's no, let's say, value in concrete.
That's true. There is value in wood, though.
For sure.
And it continues to increase. We've been seeing the last couple of months. So, do you think that then that the completely vertically integrating model, now that the Catera explosion happened, do you think it's written off?
No, not at all. That's not my message. I just warn to watch out with these models, especially when there's a lot of money being thrown at. That's my only caution here. I'm not saying that this is not the way to move forward. It's just a model to be careful with.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So in the beginning of your explanation, you were or your story, you were saying about the technology trends that you were seeing coming out of the US 7 years ago, when you were still active in the construction side of things, before you became an investor. Which were those big trends?
Yeah, you had a lot of them, and not all are applicable, of course, to Europe. Let's be honest, because the B2C market in the US is a very homogeneous market, so you can really scale. The B2C market in Europe is a lot more scattered, but on the other hand, the B2B market is quite homogeneous, so that's an interesting part of it. The interesting models we saw is like the Zillows and the likes, so gathering data around real estate, getting insights into pricing, valuation models that you could really scale throughout the US. Based on that, the iBuying model of the open doors and the likes we know in this world. So what you see in the US is you have these very similar neighborhoods. So if you have enough pricing points, you can really extrapolate those pricing points to like a whole neighborhood because they're quite similar. And again, this is an interesting model, but it's not that applicable in Europe, let's be honest. But then also, if you look at construction sites, we saw the rise of Procore, a very interesting company, which is like a very holistic approach on the building side, something that we lack in Europe, since we see now a lot of apps and interesting technologies popping up on the building side. But I often hear the feedback from construction companies that they have this app fatigue. Another app. My people on the working floor, they don't want another app. They want an integrated solution. And that's actually what Procore is doing. They started off with some solutions to the problem, but then by being the backbone, they could also add numerous other solutions to that. And by doing that, they became the one-stop shop for construction tech. And that's an interesting model. And Procore is now also entering the European market, but up to today, I haven't seen that general backbone for construction tech in Europe, and that could be a very interesting model, though.
Okay, I've never heard about Procore.
Look it up.
Okay, so it's kind of like an app store for construction apps, or
it's a collaboration platform. It's a way of digitizing all kinds of workflows and papers on the building site. It's a way of progress tracking on the building site, but they have really grown through adding smaller solutions to the platform. So they started off with their own platform, and then also through buying some acquisitions of other solutions. Mm-hmm. And now they have really an integrated solution, which is very interesting.
Okay, that's something we should check out. Okay, do you think that are we still trying to play catch up in Europe in comparison with the US? Or is it becoming more egalitarian? Are we maybe a little bit ahead? Probably not.
I have to disappoint you.
Yeah, I kind of was expecting the answer. But
in general terms, no, we're definitely lacking behind. I think where we can really make the difference, though, in Europe is that sustainability focus. Mm-hmm. I think we are way ahead in the way we build, in the way we think about building.
The quality as well?
Generally speaking, yes, I think so too. That might be a disadvantage as well. But I think that should be the focus point for the European PropTech scene, is that ESG drive in general is not just environmentally, but the ESG drive in general could be one of the, let's say, things we are ahead in compared to the US. Yeah. But technology trend, definitely not.
Why is that? Why are we behind on the technology front?
Good question. I think there are a lot of explanations to that. And not in the least that there's a very strong VC market in US, obviously. So the appetite for investing into PropTech companies is already started a long time ago into the US compared to Europe. So that's maybe one reason. They're also less risk averse in the sense that they just try things. If it doesn't work, they try another thing. We are in Europe, of course. We are really afraid of losing things and not succeeding in tryouts. And also, for sure, the fragmented market into Europe. It's very hard to get standards in a fragmented market because you have all the different regulation, different languages, different cultures, etc. But I do believe in that B2B space, again, that there are very similar needs, let's say comparing Northern Europe to Southern or Western Europe. So again, I think there lies an interesting opportunity though.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We've already covered quite a lot, I must say. I think, so to make a quick summary, with AMAVI, the idea behind the investments that you make, it's the sustainability aspect, the looking at where you can create platforms or how do you call it, the network effects inside construction.
Sure.
And those are the two main ones.
Data insights, customer experience, driving efficiency increase and carbon footprint reduction in construction tech, definitely. You can go a lot further. Of course, we see a lot more pain points, let's be honest. The value chain is full of pain points, but we should focus on those four.
And when you decide to make an investment, you just a couple of weeks ago you announced your first fund. Yeah. So 60 million, if I'm correct.
It's a 60 million fund, indeed.
Okay. And then when you make decisions in which businesses you invest, it's based on those criteria we just mentioned. And what are the other ones?
Yeah, that's just the dry criteria. So we look for companies that have, first of all, a very passionate and professional management team. That's crucial to us. And that's also where the name AMAVI comes from, by the way. That's a little anecdote. AMAVI comes from the saying of Julius Caesar. He said, Veni Vidi Vici, obviously. And that's, I came, I saw, I conquered. But there's an alternative to that, and that's Veni Vidi AMAVI. I came, I saw, and I loved. And that's what we look for in the founder of a company. That's that passion, that sparkle in the eyes. And that's the first and foremost important thing that we need to see in a founder of a company, is that passion. And why is that? Of course, that's important in succeeding in life. But then generally speaking, the sector, especially in PropTech, is evolving very rapidly. And you have to adapt your business model, your business in general, to those changing waves. And therefore, you need that passion to continually steer the ship on those changing waves. And that's what we need to see in a founder of a company. But then also, of course, we need to invest in scalable business models. So since we're not focused on just one country, but really throughout Europe, so scalability is crucial. We also look for that proven product market fit. So we don't invest early stage. So we normally invest from Series A onwards. And we have a minimal threshold of about 1 million euros in revenue. That's where we see that traction going. And that might seem low in general VC terms, but we see in PropTech that's a very important hurdle to be reached. Because it's a slow sector. It takes time to be adopted, as you know. But once you reach that threshold, we see that the interesting models really, really ramp up. And that's, of course, what we like to see. Okay.
You've made a couple of investments already?
Yep.
You mentioned one.
Yep, Finch
Buildings. What are the other ones? And what was the reasoning behind the investments?
Good question. So you made Finch Buildings is a Dutch company indeed. We made an investment into Shape, a Belgian company. I think you know the company as well. What is very interesting, Shape tackles an enormous interesting topic here. Shape is an automatic water leak monitoring and water leak detection system. So water is extremely scarce. That we know recently, because it's only getting very recently in our heads that this is a very interesting topic. But what is interesting, if you look at the statistics, let's say that 100 liters gets produced at the source, while about 15% of that water is lost during transportation, so within the public net. 15.
Yeah. Okay, whoa, that's still a lot.
It's still a lot. And then about 20 to 25% is lost within a building. So we're not talking about let's say the consumption that people have, which might not be rational. No, it's just about leakages in a building. So this is really huge. And the model that we see that Shape now is tackling, or that is rolling out, is very interesting to really just tackle those leakages in buildings, because we often just don't know where the building is leaking. They have an interesting case, by the way. They've have the city of Brussels as a client, and they've analyzed Manneke-Pis. And obviously we would think that Manneke-Pis has a leak, but actually has another leak in the sense that this is not a closed loop. So we would think that this is, of course, the same water that goes around and around and around. Yeah. Well, it's not. So it's drinking water that
goes into the drain.
Exactly.
Oh no!
And that was found by the Shape solution, and now this is fixed. Of course, it's a very easy fix. But this is just to give an example how irrational we go around with water. And if we look at the problems out there, let's say the drought, and even in Flanders is an enormous issue. people say that we will have a situation like Morocco in a couple of decades.
But you notice it today. Huh? Yeah. It's starting again. Huh? Exactly. Like last month, nothing but rain. Everything gets flooded. Nothing can take water up anymore. And then now it looks like weeks of 27, 30 degrees.
Exactly.
So to click on a couple of statistics you just said. So 15% gets wasted before it enters the building.
Exactly.
So that's government. That's the sewage system that's owned by the government.
Yep.
And then another 25, up to 25 in a building.
Depending on the exact case, but indeed between 15 and 25, that are the statistics.
Oh, wow. And that's also terrible for your building.
Yeah, exactly.
The quality of your building.
Yeah.
Okay. And their solution, because I've heard about the business before you guys invested, but then you invested and I looked a bit more, but it's still interesting to hear because it seems like a very straightforward solution.
It is. But still it's only recently, again, it's very recently that people have this sense of urgency around water because price of water is very low. Still, even today, price of water is way too low actually. And so we have to get that sense of urgency up and running. And we see that the largest property owners, the professional investors, they really have that sense of urgency right now. Mm-hmm. And that's why they look into solutions like that, because of course it can also fulfill their ESG goals. Mm-hmm. So that's a very interesting approach here. Mm-hmm. And from our point of view as an investor, it's a very interesting business model since it's 100% recurring. So it's a fixed, it's like a SaaS model. It's a fixed price per building per year. Of course, they have 5 to 10 year contracts. So very interesting.
That's interesting
investment case.
Plus, they can claim the best PropTech slogan in saying that they made Mannekepis environmentally friendly.
Exactly. But we shouldn't make that too public, though. We're a little ashamed of that as a Belgian.
Yeah. And they developed a technology solution, a meter.
Well, it's a hardware-enabled SaaS, so they need parts of hardware just to be clicked on the official water meter to be able to extract the data from the water consumption. Then, of course, the main differentiator is the software. Since they analyze the water consumption pattern, they see anomalies in the water consumption, and they can see, they can detect a leak, obviously, and also detect the source of the leak. So they can see, for instance, this is a water softener causing the leak. This is a toilet causing the leak. This is a shower causing the leak. Because if you think about a toilet, for instance, when a toilet leaks, it fills up and it goes down again. Mm-hmm. Fills up, goes down. While a shower is just dribbling.
Yeah.
So this is they can recognize that pattern in the water consumption pattern. And this is very interesting because if you have a building of, let's say, 5,000 square meters and you see there's a leak, okay, but you have to start looking for the leak. And that's a very interesting model.
So it's one hardware solution you place at like the meters, yep. And then it can indicate you if there's a leakage. It's a toilet. They can't see which specific toilet, but it's a toilet. It's a shower. It's a
exactly.
Okay, interesting. All right, so.
So that was the second, but maybe just to finish up. Yeah. So we did then the third investment in Finland, and we invested into G-Builder, also a very interesting company. Okay. Because if we go back to those silos, one way to break down the silos is to find a common language throughout the silos. And we believe that BIM is the way to move forward, to have that common language. And that's exactly what G-Builder believes as well. They have developed a platform from which you can convert classical 2D plans into a 3D BIM model, and then use that BIM model throughout the value chain. For instance, for marketing purposes, you can show every single apartment into a building, before it's built, obviously, into 3D, and people can walk around. And if they like it, they say, okay, I want this apartment, then you can configure it into that same module. So you can choose the flooring, choose the kitchen, choose the doors, etc. You see the visual impacts, but you also see the price impact. Because it's BIM-based, so it has all the quantities in the model. So if you choose the flooring, you know the square meter price of the floor, and you know the square meters of the floor as well. And what is interesting, though, this is customer experience, so a very interesting pain point. But then they also make the link between the customer experience, so making the choices, and the building site. Mm-hmm. Because the suppliers and the contractors are also on that same platform. and they see, okay, we have to order X square meters of let's say, this type of floor, X square meters of this tile, etc. And then you can use it for snaggings even. And what is even the most interesting part is that for the asset management part, you have all this data gathered throughout the construction process, and it stays in that BIM model. So for instance, you want to rent out the building, you want to renovate the building, you want to resell the building. Well, there's a kitchen that has been broken or the floor is damaged. You know exactly what type of floor is in there because it's all in that BIM model.
Oh.
And that's, again, that holistic approach that we look for.
Yeah, that sounds very promising. Although I can imagine that it's quite challenging if you don't control the different businesses that you have in your network, as every construction company has, to make them use the software solution that you, because we experienced it as well. Something as silly as even trying to have like a modular library, like what we use, and we have our production partners, and now we have our installers, just to like get the coding of the different cabinets already in line and updated across the different, every small organization. Huh?
I agree. And that's the downside of a very powerful product. It is very hard to sell because we all want a product that let's say solves all our solutions, but it's very hard to implement. People are afraid of such solutions. So what we did is we also chopped it up into different modules.
I had to keep the mic.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We tried to chop it up in different modules. Yeah. So let's say marketing purposes, configuration, execution on the building site, asset management. And then we can just sell one module to a company. For instance, you start off with the configuration. And once you're really used to that and you like it as a company, then you can add extra modules to that. But indeed, trying to sell that whole solution is very hard and is not the goal, to be honest. But it just shows how powerful it could be and what it could really do, having that common language. That's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I can see from a commercial perspective that also the phased approach will probably work way better than doing it all at once. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now you have invested in 3 businesses. What's the goal? What are you aiming for? Because I know a little bit of how a VC fund works, but maybe the listener doesn't really know how that works. Because you have that like the 60 million. That's the first fund that you raised, right?
So it's a first fund, and we did a first closing of that fund of about 30 million. So we want to go up to 60, let's say, by the beginning of next year. But indeed, it's the first fund.
And sorry to interrupt. Ticket size, from when can someone invest?
We allow investors from 500K onwards.
Okay.
But what is interesting, I didn't literally mention this, but we have sourced our investors, or LP base, we call it, limited partner base, from that construction and real estate industry. And so let's say about 75 or 80% of our investors into the fund come from that real estate and construction space. And that's very interesting because we can use, of course, those investors in a due deal phase. For instance, we're looking at a company. We have some real estate knowledge, obviously, but some subsectors of the real estate sector are very specific. Let's say asset management. Then we can use the knowledge from one of our investors, which is active within asset management, just to ask his opinion on that specific company. That, and also, of course, when we invest in a company, which is, again, active in some subset of property, then you can also, let's say, let that product be tried out by one of your investors. And that's a way to accelerate the growth of your portfolio.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's not only investing and hope they will achieve their business plan, but really want to achieve, or let's say, help in achieving that business plan. That's the idea.
So you've raised the 60 million, and how many LPs do you think that's going to be part of such a round?
It's hard to tell because in the first round, again, we focused on those family offices and construction and real estate companies. In the second funding round, we'll focus more on the semi-institutionals, more like the larger investors, probably some larger tickets. But actually, it's not the ticket size that matters to me. Especially in that first round, it's hugely important in having a broad network. And that was the goal as well. So having as much as investors from those different subsets. So what we have is architects, real estate brokers, property developers, property managers, asset managers, construction companies, suppliers to the construction industry. And that of course, is again bridging that gap. Because those people have an interest, they invested into a PropTech fund. You invest with that PropTech fund into interesting PropTech companies. But of course, they have an interest in those PropTech companies as well. And that's how you make that acceleration into PropTech, we believe.
So you could say to potential business or to businesses that you want to invest in, we can give you the funding, but we also have a network of partners behind us who can also start using the product.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not a hard commitment.
No, of course. But
they have an interest in those and the PropTech sector in general. So if we do the pre-selection and we think this is the best company we saw into that specific field, of course they will try that out.
You send an update, they see it,
exactly,
of course.
And we try to let's say have as much as interaction as possible with those investors as well. We're not a classical fund in the sense that we have one annual meeting.
Yeah.
With a glass of champagne. This is
get away.
Exactly. This is not the idea. But we try to spar on different ideas, trend we see in the sector, pain points they experience in their daily business. Because if, let's say, 5 of those investors independently from each other say the same pain point, well, that's an interesting solution to look for, of course. And that's also, again, one way to open up that ecosystem.
Network effects inside the fund.
Exactly.
All right, great. So then to get back to the original question, you invested in 3 businesses now, and then you have the 60 million. It goes to like how many?
Yeah, 10 to 15. That's basically the idea.
Yeah.
Spreading them out, geographically spread out over our focus countries. Maybe good to elaborate a bit on that. So we focus on the Benelux, we focus on France, Germany, Switzerland, and also the Nordics. Very important focus for us. We see a lot of interesting opportunities there. And we look for 10 to 15 companies throughout those focus areas.
Okay, so that also gives you the opportunity to work with them quite intensely.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what we want. We want to be a hands-on investor, not just spray and pray. We'll see what happens. Call me if there's something wrong. No, we want to be involved. We don't want to take the seat of the management. Obviously, they have to be able to do that independently. But we want to have added value. You want to have a strategic added value for those companies.
And then a fund takes, on average, 7 years?
10 years.
10 years, because PropTech.
Well, it's a general term of a fund. So that means that when you raise your funds in year 1, by year 10, you have to, again, be through the whole cycle of investment, value creation, and divestment. So an exit.
Okay.
So that's the classical term we have with a normal fund. Of course, we can, let's say, prolong the fund if it's necessary. For instance, just a hypothetical idea here, if there's a pandemic within 10 years, then we can, just purely hypothetical, then we can also make that, for instance, 12 years instead of 10. Obviously, it makes sense.
Okay.
But that's just a normal way a fund works.
Okay, so then, if it was a good first fund, there's a second one, and then, so in your career, you're going to do 2 funds, or 3, maybe 3 funds, or...
I want to work still for a long period, so I might do more.
Okay.
What is the idea is indeed, so now we have a more general PropTech fund.
Okay.
And we saw that trend in the US as well. They started off as a general PropTech fund, so with the broad definition. What we see now in the US, that we see PropTech focus funds. So focusing on construction tech or focusing on new retail concepts within PropTech. So we start to see that focused funds within PropTech. And this is our goal as well, of course. So if you want to raise a next fund, let's say within 3, 4, 5 years, we want to see how the market has been evolved in that 4 to 5 year period, and then launch a focus fund focused on that specific vertical that has the most added value.
Right. Okay. And this first one is more broad, and then maybe launch like smaller ones.
Maybe. Yeah. Or maybe the market is maturing pretty fast and we just need a second larger fund because the deal sizes are getting larger. That's also a possibility, of course. It's very hard to predict the future, but we're open to do more business. You can definitely try.
Okay. I'm quickly going to check time. Martijn, how long do we still have? 20 minutes. Okay. Then we have more than enough room to go deeper in a couple of other points. Let's see. what are the biggest challenges you identify in the market today? We already discussed a couple of them. Are there any specific ones that you also are focused on right now to maybe make a new investment into, or like the interesting? Maybe that's confidential information. I don't know.
Yeah, of course I cannot tell everything about it. But interesting question though. If we take a step back, we look at it from a macroeconomic level. I think there are some huge challenges ahead of us. Because, as you know, construction has a huge carbon footprint the way we build right now. That's an issue right now, but it might be a larger issue in the future since there's still a huge need for buildings, especially affordable buildings. Because especially we see in countries like in Africa or in the Eastern or in Asia, we see this growing need, people that have more buying power, that want affordable housing. But if we keep building the way we build right now, this will be a huge issue for climate in general. So I think this is an interesting point in time. I think if we can still change the way we build, make that more efficient, make that more sustainable, we can still change that trend of pollution in general. And that's an interesting point in time because we still can make the difference. And that combined again with the fact that there's a huge need for affordable housing. So again, we need to make that production process more efficient.
Yeah, that's true. Because if you think ahead, you can already imagine that when climate change is only becoming worse and worse, that also legislation and society is no longer gonna accept the most polluting variables in this problem to continue as they have been doing. So the pressure of the industry is only going to increase legislation and carbon taxing and...
For sure. And that's the only way to do it. The industry is not going to disrupt itself.
Yeah.
And we need external pressures, like regulation is one. But to us, COVID is also an external pressure. And this is interesting. It has put enormous pressure on digitization or in the adoption of digitization, and also very much applicable to the construction and real estate space. And we need more of those external pressures. But we see a lot of those external pressures coming together right now. So, as I said, regulatory, climate change, COVID, but also just demographic shifts. If you look at construction, there's a huge scarcity of labor force as well. And that is also one that pushes that automation, robotization even, and just efficiency increase in general into that construction market.
Have you seen a lot of interesting robotics companies? This is always something, for the construction on site itself?
We've seen quite some interesting examples in the US where they automate excavators. For the classic caterpillars we know for general infrastructure works. And of course, again, it's a US market, but we've seen companies that can fully automate it, GPS monitored, and it's just, we can put like 5 excavators just in parallel with one operator. He doesn't need to be on the building site permanently. He can be at his house as well. And they just do their work day and night, just what they are programmed to do.
Really? In an urban environment?
In an urban environment, of course, this is more difficult.
Yeah.
You need space.
Okay.
But they have collision control. They of course, they stop. They don't collide with each other, obviously. But I've not seen this within an urban area. You have to see this where, for instance, you want to make a canal or a road, let's say the foundations of a windmill, for instance, where you have a lot of space. There, this is perfectly feasible.
You know, is it the name of that business that we can put in the show notes? Because that's a movie I want to see.
I'll look it up. I don't know it by heart, but I'll look it up.
Automatic. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. See, for that it would work. But personally, I'm always fascinated by the 3D printing of the structure. I'm fascinated by it, but when I think about commercial implementation, especially in the regions where it's going to be necessary, urban environments, I don't see it.
I agree. I have some doubts about it. It's a very interesting technology, and it will have some applications for sure. But I am more fond of indeed doing that in a production process, controlled, not on the building site. and making, as you said, the more building blocks and then assembling the building blocks on site. I think that has more future than doing the whole production process still on site. Because indeed, then you need space. Those 3D printers also have a lot of need a lot of space.
Yeah. Yeah, in Westerlo, of all places, they have built a big 3D printer, but I saw it recently. There's like 12 containers around the printer to make it work. And then I was just thinking, okay, but then you need to buy the houses next to your building so that you can place your containers so that your robot can... Yeah.
Not that easy.
No. Any other interesting... Because
we've seen plastering robots, painting robots, and if you think about dangerous tasks, I think this makes sense. Painting the outside wall of a very large building, for instance. A lot of accidents happen if just people do that. It's a dangerous job. But we've seen robots that just crawl on a building and can do small damage repairs, paintings of building. And that could be an interesting solution, though.
Installed on the probably already standing scaffolding in front of the building.
That also, but also crawling with the cable tied on the roof, and they just crawl the facade of a building. We're not there yet. We're just scratching the surface here, and very interesting that these technologies do pop up, get tried out on a small scale. But I think we will see a lot of robotization in the near future. I'm quite sure. Also because we don't have people.
You don't have the people, huh?
Obviously.
No. It's true. It already is an issue. It's not going to be an issue. It is an issue.
It is an issue.
You already mentioned the C word, COVID. What have you spotted around? What is this? What is COVID? What has it already done? Right. We think it has had a huge impact on the office space. That's the first one that comes to mind. Are there like second and third consequences that you see going to happen in the near future?
There's already a lot being said about COVID, but in general, COVID to me is an accelerator of every trend that was already happening, but not on a larger scale. If you look at e-commerce, if you look indeed at that hybrid way of working, if you look at the adoption of technology in general, it all has been in the pipe for quite a while, but now finally getting out there and finding its way through. So actually, COVID was the blessing for PropTech that we needed. It was, again, that external pressure that puts something in practice which was not imaginable before. The amount of Zoom calls we had the last couple of months or year, we couldn't have this imagined. But on the other hand, for instance, for a company like ours, this is very interesting because we can have talks with anybody throughout Europe just in a couple of hours. And if you use it in the right way, very important, this can be a very interesting tool for your productivity. And I think that's the same with PropTech in general. COVID has put the accelerator on PropTech. And that's, again, this is very interesting to see because otherwise the trends that we have seen last year might took, 5 years to happen out there.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Also for sales, huh? I mean, if I compare my last year with the years before, how many sales meetings I could do in a week?
True.
It's incredible, huh?
Yeah. You see that the twofold approach. Some companies are just lost, just cut out completely, and other companies get really accelerated to that COVID because indeed they can make their sales more efficient. Make people more efficient by working a couple of days from home, etc. So you really have to adapt yourself, of course, to that. Mm-hmm. But interesting movement for sure.
Yeah, just to also put a little bit of a nuance on my previous statement, we have also noticed a lot of downsides.
Especially the first couple of months, of course, was very hard insecurity.
Yeah, because also getting into organizations with like a first introduction when no one was used to doing first introductions via Zoom.
True.
Sales was done for 3-4 months. And then now that we also noticed, and that prolonged way longer in our experience is, and I already said it before we started talking, but the building permit process, a lot of was hidden behind the COVID excuse.
True.
And no people who, the people who needed to make the decisions who were not reachable. They're working from home. You can't reach them. It's definitely slowed things down. Okay. Any other major challenges outside of the environmental thing? Hear me talk.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge of our time.
I
the
think
environmental thing.
Yeah, but there are a lot of challenges, let's be honest. But again, I think that finding some way of standardization into the building process, to me, is the largest challenge that is out there. And that could be done in many ways, but we need to get rid of that thinking of designing a building from scratch every time over and over again. And again, I have to add to that it's not the goal to make every building look the same. Let's be clear on that. It's just about finding that common language, like BIM, but even within BIM, there's no standardization up to today, and finding that standardized grid to build upon. And then you can start adding creativity to it. You can add another facade, add another type of building material, but start using that grid. This is crucial in building.
Yeah,
that to me is one of the main challenges. Let's be honest.
I couldn't agree more.
I thought so.
Without sounding too biased, I couldn't agree more. Maybe a couple of maybe one bigger question and then a couple of fun ones to end with. You started AMAVI how long ago now?
About a year ago. We started off January last year with the general ideas, working out the concepts. And we started looking for investments about exactly 1 year ago.
So in 1 year, you launched the fund, you finished the first funding, made the first 3 investments. I would say that was quite a productive year.
Well, we did our best.
But what are the biggest lessons? Or if there's even one big lesson that you learned throughout the last 12 months, is there something you can give to our audience that they could take in their own day-to-day operations?
It's an interesting question. What I've learned, and it's not completely new, but it's an important lesson though, is that you might have a bright idea, really solving the issue spot on, and from a rational point of view, makes a lot of sense, but it might not succeed at all in practice. And that's the hard thing about construction. We can have the best solution out there, but it not getting adopted into the sector. And this is such a pity that we see fantastic products, fantastic solutions out there, but not finding the right way into that sector. And this was, again, one of the main, let's say, issues we wanted to solve with AMAVI, is translating the needs of that old school sector to that new school PropTech sector and trying to bridge that let's say, very different worlds. And it's a pity that we see fantastic companies and fantastic products not getting the attention and not getting the traction they actually would deserve. That's the pity about the slow-paced sector that we're active in.
Anything that we could do to solve that issue?
Good question. I think it takes time. It takes a lot of evangelizing. That's how I see myself as well. Trying to persuade people into the sector of the advantages and just trying it and showing that it's feasible. Because a lot of companies still want to see the proof of a certain product or a certain added value. So we should just try it and go out there. That's my main advice.
Okay. Couple of fun ones. If there's one person in construction that you can have a beer with in a bar on a warm summer evening, who would it be? Anyone that pops into mind?
I would like to have a chat with the founder of Catera actually right now. This would be a very interesting talk to see how he has experienced this story.
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting chat, though.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. The guy, he did a business before, yeah? Well, I heard it on a podcast this week.
Fact check.
What's his name again? Can you find it, Marty? CEO. But he was fired in May already because they had financial issues. Michael Marks.
What's his exact background?
Former
Yeah, that's true.
There it is.
That's true. That's true. I always used to say this in my sales pitch. How could I forget this? It's true. He was the CEO of Tesla for a while before Elon Musk took over.
Interesting.
Yeah, something. Yeah. One of his vertical integration companies worked, seemed to be working.
Yeah. We'll see.
We'll see. Final fun one. The pandemic seems to be coming to an end. Any specific locations or activities that you are very much looking forward to now?
Just one?
The best, the one that you're most looking forward to?
I think it's a very classical one, but traveling is really something that I need and get energy from. And the first, I think, non-business travel that we will do is traveling to LA. Since we have a very special bond with LA, I think this is one of the best places in the world to live, actually.
Really?
Have a lot of things, let's say, gathered in just one city or one area. It's a very large area. I have some friends and some family there. I think it's a wonderful place to be. And actually, what I look when I go traveling, and this is even more the case now with PropTech, is of course get inspired. I think one of the best places to be inspired is definitely the West Coast in technology terms. And this is something I really want to urgently do and get out there.
Yeah, Los Angeles, I've never been there. I do hear that it's very
spread
out.
Yes. Normally you have a lot of traffic jams, and this is really even worse than Belgium. But apparently this is today, or up to today at least, this is not very much the case, because a lot of people still work from home, and it's actually very good to be there right now because you can move around more than, let's say, 2 or 2.5 years ago.
That's good to hear, because that's where Elon Musk got his idea for the how is it, the Hyperloop.
Yeah,
because he was always standing in traffic apparently.
Exactly.
He was so sick of it.
Let's do something about it.
Let's do something about it. That's maybe the best way to summarize this conversation.
Exactly. Let's do something about it together, Benjamin.
Yeah, indeed. We are trying, and I hear and I understand you are very much doing the same. So exactly. Let's hope we can make a difference.
Sounds good.
Arne, thank you very much. And maybe we can have another chat in a couple of months or a couple of years for round 2. But in the meantime, I wish you the best of luck with helping to scale the many, I must say, beautiful organizations that you're investing in.
Thank you. Very happy to be here again.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Bao Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe to our channel. If you're interested in Bao Living in our Smart Adaptable Module or SAM, go check out our website baoliving.com. If you want to stay up to date, you can best subscribe to our monthly newsletter on our website or follow us on all social media platforms where we're named @Bao Living.